today's episode of Hubris Syndrome, Resident Evil is back! Drink it in, ladies and gentlemen. Just bask in Resident Evil 7 for a moment. Just give it a moment of silence. Let's get started. We got a lot to talk about. So after Resident Evil 6, Capcom gives us little hints. They say, you know, our fans didn't really like the action approach that Resident Evil 6 took. They want more survival horror. So then we got a little bridge. We got a little Revelations 2, little return of Barry Burton and Claire Redfield, and it was glorious. Great game. If you haven't played Revelations 2, you know, you're looking to scratch your Resident Evil itch after you've beaten 7 9 times like most of us have, check out Revelations 2. So they kept asking the fans what they wanted, and it was always the same. It was more survival horror. And that feels so good knowing that Capcom listened and delivered that old school survival horror. So let's dive right into 7. First, I want to talk about the lore, because you know that I'm obsessed with Resident Evil lore. They showed this game so secretively, and thank you, Capcom, for doing that, keeping everyone's expectations in check at the cost of your sales, perhaps, by not revealing too much. When you debuted Resident Evil 7 in first person, you had all the haters, all of them, shouting from the rooftops, "That's not Resident Evil." Yeah, you know, Resident Evil 4 wasn't Resident Evil either, and it's considered one of the greatest games ever made. You had all the haters saying, first person, what is this, PT? Meanwhile, Capcom showing so little of their game, not showing combat for what felt like a year, they just didn't show it, no combat shown, and really driving home this like Southern horror Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibe, not showing the later parts of the game. I respect that move. More studios need to look at Capcom and Resident Evil 7 when showing off their game. They didn't drown us in the hype. They were confident. They knew what they had. They showed what they needed to show and respected the player. So really all we get are a couple brief tie-ins to the existing Resident Evil franchise, which I loved because every time one popped up, it was a treat. We saw Clive O'Brien, leader of the BSAA, turns up as some author on a book, subtle nod. One of my favorite references in the game, a picture of the Arkalay Mountains, where Resident Evil 1 started. I must have stopped and stared at that picture for 30 minutes, just drinking in the nostalgia without it being shoved down my throat. Alyssa Ashcroft writing some newspaper article. She was in Resident Evil Outbreak. Then there's the newspaper article late in the game referencing the survivors of Raccoon City, and that one blew my mind because for so long, I've always thought about the heroes of Resident Evil and the survivors like Leon and Claire and Sherry and Chris and Jill. I've never thought about everyday citizens that survived the outbreak and escaped Raccoon City. And just that little article opened my eyes to a brand new perspective of the entire original trilogy. Now when I go back and I play Resident Evil 2 or 3, I want to be thinking about just ordinary citizens, ordinary survivors escaping Raccoon City, and I love that that offered me a fresh perspective to the classics. Another one of my favorites that just touches my heart and soul is them making fun of the Baker Mansion, like who builds this stuff, and later on you find a document referencing Trevor, presumably George Trevor, the original Spencer Mansion architect. Just that tie-in, it just gets me, knowing that there is a connection there to the Spencer Mansion and the original Resident Evil. And then lastly, the only real thing that I knew going in, I was just so sure of it because it's so easy, and it happened in a way, but Capcom decided to troll us with it, is going in, I assumed a classic character would show up at the very, very end of the game. And sure enough, after the final boss, a helicopter comes and a soldier comes down on a rope with a gas mask, takes it off and says, "I'm Redfield." You're Redfield? Chris Redfield? Chris Redfield's clone? Chris Redfield's brother? Chris Redfield's long-lost uncle or nephew? Or somebody else more sinister? As the chopper flies away, we see an Umbrella logo. Now, of course, Umbrella was dissolved in between Resident Evil Code Veronica and Resident Evil 4. Neo Umbrella was being run by Ada's clone in Resident Evil 6, but I think that was more of like a shell corporation. So now we get this new blue Umbrella logo. Could it possibly mean that it's Hunk? Please, Capcom, let it be Hunk. Please let it be Hunk. Resident Evil 2 Remake is on the horizon. What a perfect opportunity, just like Resident Evil Remake did, by retroactively putting lore in there. What a beautiful time to expand Hunk's role in Resident Evil 2 Remake, planting the seeds for Resident Evil 8, setting him up as the new big bad. Capcom, please, Hunk, please. Next up, kind of a 2-for-1, I want to talk about first person and VR. Whew! Motion sickness. Motion sickness at first. Eventually, as I played more and more and more, I survived the motion sickness, but it can be a little jarring. Definitely a great way to play Resident Evil 7 because I'd never played anything like that. The VR. There are moments in the game that are so VR focused, like going down in the water and it's right up to your nose. The final boss, when it picks you up and you're looking up at it. Even smaller moments, like when Mia is just behind a locked cell door with the light shining through, just peering through the cell bars. It is a very new feeling and very memorable. You know, you look at the history of Resident Evil, you look at the original trilogy, along with Zero and Code Veronica, are fixed cameras. So let's just look at it like this: like 1, 2, 3 fixed cameras, 4, 5, 6 behind the back action style, 7, 8, and 9 first person. Sure, I'll do it. Let's go. What a great way to section off this trilogy and reaffirm the fact that Resident Evil changes with the times. One misstep here with Resident Evil 6, they've immediately recovered with Revelations and now Resident Evil 7. And they're not afraid to take risks. Like, when I finished Resident Evil 7, I can't imagine 8 not being first person. I'm so excited for them to expand it even further. It was just such a great feeling too, because we were this new protagonist, and for so long we've been playing as the heroes of Resident Evil. We have been a fly on the wall. You know, we've been guiding them through this crisis, and now with a brand new protagonist and a brand new slate and it being first person, it was like I was walking those halls. I was going through this mansion, and it just felt so good as a fan of Resident Evil to be a part of it one step further than normal. And it still felt like a Resident Evil game because the bosses, the creatures, I mean, when Jack shows up at the end, all morphed, he's got eyeballs sticking out of him. It was just classic Resident Evil monster design. The same with the molded. All those little traces are there throughout the whole game, you know, herbs and even item management and placement. Just the flow of item acquisition was very Resident Evil, and little puzzles like the shotgun puzzle, you know, lever-based, weight-based puzzles. It just constantly felt like they were patting me on the back, like, yo, this is Resident Evil. But at the same time, it felt so new and fresh. So that's it, Resident Evil 7, not to mention all the awesome DLC that we've got, and the 3 DLC coming in spring, Not a Hero. Are we gonna play as Hunk? Or Redfield's long-lost nephew? Who are we going to play as in that DLC? Only time will tell. It is my most anticipated because you've left me hungry for answers, Capcom. Oh, I'm hungry. I'm losing sleep at night over it. So that's it. Resident Evil is back. It feels so good. It was such high stakes. And I can breathe easy knowing that Resident Evil 6 is a distant memory. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to talk more about Resident Evil 7 in detail, about my review, about this episode, we'll have Talking Syndrome Saturday, 11 a.m. We are Easy Allies. Follow us on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, all the social medias. We're streaming just about every day. We're Patreon supported. So if you like what you see, help us out. And we will see you next week.
It's time for the syndrome.
There's no better time than now to go back to the greatest video game ever created, Resident Evil 2. Unlock Hunks Mode, 4th Survivor, check it out, play for yourself, see his origins, and then play Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, beat it 10 times, unlock his epilogue, then play Code Veronica and get that one little document in that room that references Hunk. Then you've got all the lore you need, ready for Resident Evil 8.